I think that's why you see the division. I don't think there's any hard feelings with me and any of the farm state senators. I'm kind of you see what you get, and what you get is what you're going to see.
When Market to Market sat down with Oklahoma's junior senator last week, he was in the midst of a legislative marathon. The two-term senator had suffered a procedural setback just days earlier, but was moments away from dealing a body blow to government-subsidized ethanol.
And when oil's at near $100 a barrel, and we continue to send the money out of the country instead of go after our own resources, which are plentiful, we have to ask the question, what are we doing?
Alongside California's Dianne Feinstein, Coburn garnered more than enough votes to slash the federal blender's credit and eliminate America's import tariff on foreign ethanol. The 73-27 rout of farm state biofuel interests was a stunning turnaround for a federal subsidy once considered untouchable. But federal ethanol subsidies have collided with a nexus of government debt, market volatility, and general legislative distaste for federal spending.
We're really not serious. We're really not serious about heeding the mandate of last November to stop spending, to stop wasteful projects, to stop the unnecessary projects such as ethanol subsidies.
If we could save $2 billion this year, that's great for our kids, great for our country. It's $2 billion we don't have to borrow. So I think that's important, especially when the people who are getting it say we don't want the money. I mean, it's hard to sell to the American people. Here's big companies that are making billions of dollars every year, and we're giving them billions, and they're saying they don't want it, but we're going to keep shoving it down their throat. That's a pretty hard sell to the American public.
Coburn's critics have essentially handed him that signature talking point. Pro-ethanol groups like Growth Energy and the Renewable Fuels Association have advocated a transition away from blender's credits and import tariffs to gas station infrastructure for E85 pumping stations. But not until the tax credits were set to expire later this year.
We didn't think very much of Senator Coburn's bill at all. I mean, this is gamesmanship. This isn't about legislating. Senator Coburn just a month ago voted to preserve tax incentives for the oil industry. And yet he feels it's okay to single out the ethanol industry and just slash the ethanol tax incentive today with no plan for the future. What we've been trying to work with members of Congress about is, okay, we know the ethanol tax incentive is going to change. We know that it is going to go away. But how are we going to address our energy problems? How are we going to assure that there's investment in the next generation of biofuels?
And the newly sworn 112th Congress is likely going to decide the future of our industry.
As a major lobbyist on Capitol Hill, Bob Dineen saw this vote coming. So did many of the other lobbyists who spent considerable resources battling over ethanol's future. According to nonpartisan publisher CQ Press, ExxonMobil, Kraft Foods, General Mills, and the Grocery Manufacturers Association were principal lobbyists on the Coburn-Feinstein bill. In addition to Dineen's RFA and Tom Bias from the biofuel advocacy group Growth Energy, the National Corn Growers Association also lobbied in favor of ethanol interests. Critics of Coburn criticize his action as an attack on ethanol, while he defends oil company tax benefits. But the former accountant sees the energy landscape differently.
What the oil and gas industry and many others get are accelerated depreciation schedules. But if you take that accelerated depreciation schedule away, they're going to pay exactly the same tax over time. They're just not, what we're doing is we're advancing it so we put more capital into drilling and exploring for more oil and natural gas in our country, not somewhere else.
The Coburn victory stunned scores of rural and urban Americans, many of which had turned a blind eye to a rising political tide against corn-based fuel. Riding the top of that wave is Tom Coburn.
We can increase taxes $1 trillion by lowering tax rates and getting rid of things like the ethanol blender's credit that you all pay $6 billion a year for and then go to the pump and pay another $1.72 a gallon in subsidies for ethanol blended gasoline. The reason I'll stand up as a conservative Republican, one of the biggest deficit hawks in Congress, and say, I'll negotiate on taxes because our country's in trouble.
Curtailing the national debt is more than a political talking point of the moment for the Oklahoma physician turned politician. Coburn's Senate office proudly displays the national debt clock for the senator and all of his guests to see.
We don't have any problem we can't solve. We can solve them all, but we have to do it in a way that recognizes what's in front of us. And you can see U.S. public debt, subject to limits, at $14,286 billion. And watch how fast it's going up.
While Coburn sees ethanol subsidies as the first step towards deficit reduction, his farm state Republican colleagues have different opinions.
These amendments won't lower the price of gasoline at the pump. That's what people today are concerned about.
We had 81 votes in the United States Senate in December that said these are going to be the rules of the game until December of this year. And so now we have this effort to completely change the rules in the middle of the game.
South Dakota Republican John Thune and Minnesota Democrat Amy Klobuchar are co-sponsoring legislation that will slowly draw down the federal ethanol tax credits and repurpose them for gas pump infrastructure. But negotiation with Coburn will be essential. His subsidy slashing amendment is not law, despite an overwhelming, if not symbolic, victory. For one of the most conservative senators on Capitol Hill to build a 70-vote majority on any tax-related bill is an uncanny achievement of bipartisanship. But it's not the first one for Coburn. Shortly after entering the Senate in 2005, the Oklahoman befriended a fellow freshman from Illinois, who would later become president. But the senatorial relationship has not prevented him from criticizing President Obama on debt and deficit issues. It remains to be seen if he can come together with fellow farm state senators to bridge a divide between deficit and ethanol.
This is really a generational clash. We're either going to fix this or we're going to create a markedly lower standard of living for every American in the next 10 to 15 years.
For Market to Market, I'm Andrew Bott.